Hi, everybody, and you're all very welcome tonight. We have Mark Cooking with us, who I will introduce, but I'll kind of hand it over to Mark to introduce himself. And I've got Kev on with me tonight, who's going to be kind of co-interviewing. Mark has worked in finance and was the youngest, now you're going to help me again here, the youngest fellow of the Fellowship of Chartered
Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Bankers.
Bankers, and he worked in finance and banking. He was also a druid for a while, weren't you, and a member of quite a few secret societies, and has studied and lectured in the kind of the occult and its links to finance and the power elites for quite a while now. So, Mark, just basically come in and I suppose tell us a little bit of your background, and then we'll go straight into it all.
Sure. Well,
it's lovely having you here. You're very welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Just to correct what you said there, I've never been a member of secret societies.
I'm sorry.
I have associated with members of secret societies of all sorts, but I made it a principle of mine not to join anything, really. I was in this research for my own purposes, to find my own answers. So I never got bogged down by joining anything, but I did find that just by introducing myself as Druid, that it opened up various doors to many of the esoteric societies and so on. So I haven't been a member, okay?
Okay.
I've been in finance, mainly as a mortgage specialist most of my career. Mortgages was what I did for 26 years in, well, it was 9 years in Northern Rock, for example, and other banks and building societies after that. And about 9 years self-employed as a mortgage specialist and compliance specialist, showing solicitors and other people dealing in the finance world how to set up mortgage portfolios and sales teams and this kind of thing. Very much about regulation of mortgages.
Okay. And the what kind of led you towards an interest? Obviously, that you were in there and you're working in finance, and obviously there was something that caught your eye about the kind of the whole occult side. How did that all kind of come into view?
Well, I think it's fair to say the two things were separate. I hadn't unified them in the early days. As to occult side, well, that word means so many different things to different people. Think of it as studying the hidden knowledge, the esoteric side of reality, the physics of it, the nature of reality. Always interested me as a kid. I was going to the library and reading physics books and chemistry books and that kind of thing. I wasn't so much a nerd as I found that what I was being told at school just didn't make any sense, so I went to try and learn what I could for myself. And I found from quite an early age that if you go and look, even at mainstream science, you don't have to look too far. Just look at what they're doing at the pointy end of each scientific subject. And you find that they all tend to unify, or I did. And then later on in life, I found the thing that does unify them. Not that I found it, it's out there for anyone who wants to go and look. But yes, there was always the two sides. There was the finance and the occult or the esoteric. I joined the Druid Order from about the age of, gosh, I lose track, 25, something like that. And although I left that order, I really still used the wisdom tradition that I learned to pursue my own studies, if that makes sense.
And what was it that you learned with the Druids? Like what?
Well, as anyone would if they were to join the Druid organisations in the UK or around Europe and America now, you would. Well, actually, it's best summed up by saying it's very similar to the Rosicrucian teaching material. It's very similar to the Freemasonic teaching materials, and that's largely because they are all one and the same thing at the end of the day.
What is the main? I mean, we know it's kind of hidden knowledge and kind of guarding a tradition, and all the sort of the ancient. I don't know what would you call it? The ancient ways, really, that I suppose the church and all sorts of people who, of course, use themselves but have tried to stamp out. But what's the actual? What is it? How would you sum it up? Is what these organizations, the guys at the very top are trying to...
No, I mean, the Druids, the guy at the chosen chief of the Druids in this country is Philip Carr-Gom. Really nice fella. Very spiritual, as is everybody that you would meet in that order. This is one of the things that kind of inspired me to speak out originally, because obviously people are waking up nowadays to the fact that there is an occult knowledge being used against against the global population. And when you try and learn what that is, well, it's a lifetime study in itself, by definition. There are so many aspects to the occult, so you can only ever pursue those which you pursue, which you get into. But I've gone down many avenues, largely to try and prove what I originally discovered to be wrong. I wanted to prove it wrong because I became aware that there was an elite group issuing our currency as a debt, and that in fact they were using an ancient knowledge, a corruption of an ancient knowledge. So you could say that these people are Druids, but I'd have to make it very clear that they're not. Any decent Druid order would throw them out, because the whole principle of Druidry is the service of others, really. Self-awareness, love, peace, you name it. As is the Freemasons, as are the Rosicrucians, as are any of these orders. That doesn't mean that they can't be used, though, from the top. I've found, for example, in the Druid orders, I met loads of wonderful people, great people, and still friendly with a number of them today. But you come across, again, in any esoteric tradition, it's about knowing yourself. I mean, that has to be the greatest saying of all time, is know thyself. It's the Hermetic adage, but it lays at the root of all of these traditions. So the people within them are learning good stuff, and I don't mean to say anything against them or the stuff that they are learning. It did kind of dawn on me, though, that it was all rather fickle, very much caught up in the ceremony, and kind of missing the point. I know on the occasions when I said, well, surely the Druid order should stand up against these criminals, talking about the bankers, then you'll find that they don't get involved in politics. They're not interested. And yet I think it's their duty to realize that these people are using a Druidic knowledge, a corrupted Druidic knowledge, to issue the currency in the way that they do. And the Druids, above all, should stand up and expose these people.
And when you say these people, like, are these people that would be in any of these organizations, or...
No.
No?
No. I don't know. No one really does, but no, I don't imagine that you'd find them in these organizations. What you find is that they set them up. To my knowledge, the Druid orders in this country were re-established largely down to Sir George Trevelyan and others, going back to the 1920s, with a view to increasing spiritual awareness and spirituality, and bridging the religions. When I first joined the Druid Order, we were going around, I was going to say going around churches. That sounds like we did lots, but no, I went to 2 churches with others, and the notion was to meet the bishops and so on and discuss with them how they can reintroduce spirituality into their church services and so on. It struck me as very strange.
You said that the Druid Order was formed in, was it 19 something, was it? But are the Druids not kind of ancient, did they not come out?
Yes, we're talking about the modern orders, which are drawing on that ancient knowledge, which was always verbal anyway. There's no, or very little, written history to this, which tends to be used against you. People say, well, if there was no written history, then, how do you know that this stuff is real, or that it's there, or that it's ancient? And my answer to that is go and study Druidry for 15 years, and then you'll understand. I mean, they did have bards. That really is what I consider myself. The verbal tradition of using words and music to pass the messages on.
Sorry about my dogs here in the background.
So, this is a very confusing area, and I think that people like the Druids and perhaps like the Rosicrucians and so on are all being tarnished because there is an occult order in charge of this world. And in many respects, or in many ways, they perhaps actually set up these orders. You can trace the Rosicrucians arguably all the way back to Giordano Bruno. And what were they called? The Giordanites, I think, which was a secret society that Bruno himself was going to set up, and this was the reason he was burned at the stake by the Catholic Church. And you could then argue that became the Rosicrucians and the Illuminati, as in the Bavarian Illuminati. That can't be proven, but the central tenets are there, and the timeline is there, and the people were there and sharing their knowledge. So you can track all of these things through, and it kind of concerns me today that the truth movement, and you have to define that for yourself, but I use the phrase very widely, somehow seems to think that the Illuminati are trying to introduce a new world order to enslave us all. My response to that is I want a new world order. It's the old world order that's the problem. And actually what's going on is they're just simply trying to retain control. And who are these Illuminati anyway? Because originally they were the enemy of the church. They stood against organized religion, believing that it was actually an unchristian thing to do. And that was based on their records of Jesus and all that kind of thing. So I do find today that a lot of these esoteric orders and wisdom traditions seem to be getting lumped in with the occult order that runs the world. And they shouldn't be. They're full of good people who should wake up to the fact that, like everyone else, they're being used. And I believe we should all come together. I still call on Philip Carr-Gunn to stand up and condemn, on behalf of the Druid Order, the evil that's being done to people through the banking system.
And can you elaborate a little bit more on how they're being used? I mean,
well, yeah, if we can shift focus perhaps to the Freemasons, which again, is very similar to the Druids. They learn the same stuff. To my knowledge, the Druids learn an awful lot more than any Freemason's ever going to do, and a lot quicker. But it's all the same kind of stuff. I mean, a Freemason can take the first 3 degrees easily within the first year of being there. It's not so much a qualification as a mind expansion program. And as any Freemason will tell you, They are there to help society. They do charity work. It's always local work. Wherever the Freemason is, they work locally with charity and so on. So these are good people doing good things. But the point is, it's firmly ensconced within the capitalist financial system that we currently have. So all the good that they're doing is actually for the system. As I pointed out to a Freemason, actually it was just 2 weeks ago, I was staying with a friend, and in comes this guy who I immediately spotted as a Mason, and within 2 minutes he was telling me he was Knight Templar. So we had a very good conversation there, because I've met a lot of these people. That, of course, is the Masonic Templars. I would hold that there's a bigger organisation than that, and you only need to read the books of Lawrence Gardner, Sir Lawrence Gardner, who died last year, I think, to understand that these traditions have gone on for centuries, and they hold documents and records of history which actually has provided the backdrop for this awakening. An awful lot of this knowledge came out of the Knights Templar and an organisation called Sakani Rand, which is based in Hungary, and that is basically the teaching wing of the Knights Templar. But again, all this stuff is there for anybody to know.
Can I come in there?
Yeah.
It's really interesting what you're saying. But I think that probably what is in people's minds when they think of groups like Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, the Knights Templar, is that many of its adherents over the years would be the main players in what we would call the power system or whatever it is. They seem to churn out a lot of these people. The Knights Templars themselves, we can historically trace that they are responsible for, heavily responsible for the modern finance system and the modern legal system. When you've got like the Inner Temple in the city of London there, and we have a central bank here in Temple Bar, we've got Templemore House and things like that. So I think when you say that the people in these organisations are good, I don't doubt that there is good people in it, but when we look at the historical figures that have come about over the years, and the fact that they're in these secret societies which involve secrets, that you access these secrets through initiation ceremonies, it's not open to the whole public. I think that's probably where people are getting the suspicions from. And then you have the idea of Druidry. Winston Churchill was an initiated Druid. He then, as far as I know, left the Druidic order to go into politics, and then when he finished his role in politics, went back into Druidry. Queen Elizabeth, who is a main character in whatever this power structure is going on, she's one of the figureheads of it, is an initiated Druid. So I think it's quite, I can see why people would have these suspicions.
Oh, well, no, I do see why, and I'm trying in my own way to kind of draw the line between the two. And it's hard to put into words, but I would say that there is a Masonic aspect to this, which is wholly part of the oligarchy that controls. And then there is the more spiritual aspect. It's a difficult one to put into words.
I think, you spoke earlier about the sciences, and that this is it's just information, okay? And information is neutral. It's what you do with that information that determines whether it's negative or positive. So would I be right in saying that when you're trying to separate it there, that let's say the Hermetic sciences is one thing, and then the people who use these for ill or for good is a separate thing, and we should differentiate down that line?
Very much so, very much so. That's a clear exposition, really, of what I mean. It's not the knowledge itself, it's what's done with it. So you could take a Christian, for example, who would look at the Hermetic sciences, the Hermetic knowledge. They would call it occult. Many would call it satanic, Luciferian. All of these names, just words that mean nothing, because if you go and study the natural sciences, as many are, and have done, you will find that actually the Hermetic sciences are those natural sciences, and an awful lot has been known for an awful long time. So it's not bad. The knowledge isn't bad. It's the people who have taken that and twisted it against society. Now, they are not Druids. By definition, they cannot be. No Druid could do that. You could also argue that, for example, no Christian would go and commit a sin. We all know they do.
Yeah, or go on a crusade even.
Yeah, so it's hard to find the words for this, but there is an ancient knowledge. There is nothing bad about it, to my experience, or knowledge, which, of course, isn't... what am I trying to say? I couldn't claim to know it all. Anyone who claims to know the occult simply doesn't understand the occult. I know what I know.
That there is no kind of satanic orders, there's no dark...
Oh, there are.
bad stuff going on. We're not trying to say that the Druids are this or the,
Oh no, there's not within Druidry. I've never come across anything like that.
But that this knowledge is it's a bit like electricity, that you can use it for good. It's the intent, that the knowledge is there, but it's the intention of
That's
the person. Right.
Well, a true Satanist, I don't know if you've ever spoken to any, but if you go and speak to them, you'll find they're just as good and just as spiritual as you and I, or any Christian or Muslim or whatever. Then, of course, there are the more extreme versions of that. And I wouldn't and couldn't speak for them at all. They're just... well, I'm trying to think of the name. Crowley, for example. I mean, if you go and look at Aleister Crowley, who obviously is Satanist, he was looking at the Hermetic knowledge and the ancient knowledge, and he worked with invocation and this kind of thing, and became a very knowledgeable person, pretty wicked as well, pretty nihilistic and self-centered. It's all there for anyone to go and research. And you find this with people who go into what they term Satanism. It destroys their character. It just turns them into a weak shadow of what they intended to be in the first place.
Well, I know that, in America you had, what was his name, Anton LaVey. I remember seen his daughter on quite a few talk shows, and the big Christian right-wing interviewers, trying to defend Satanism. And she seems to... always pull out these kind of comparisons about, the Christianity being worse and more hypocritical. And she says that, real Satanism, they, sacrifice animals and things, but they would never hurt a person. And it's interesting to watch her. I watched her last week. And then you have his son coming out. I listened to an interview last year with a guy called Stu Webb in England or in the USA, and the son was saying basically that he'd witnessed child sacrifice all his life secretly, but watched his father and various members of the US government murder people, children, sexually abuse them and kill them constantly on these rituals, and that he himself was tied to a table and castrated by his own father. The daughter coming out saying, we never hurt anyone, and the son coming out going, they killed... I got so used to children being sacrificed and watching people being killed, and I myself was mutilated. Sorry, I've got to get the dogs out of the room.
My understanding of Satanism, if I just pop in there, is that it's a sort of it's a pure egotistical religion, in that yourself is superior, and there's no need to help weaker animals or weaker creatures because it's survival of the fittest, and that we, like, in the Hermetic sciences or in this way of thinking, sacrifice, whether it's a sacrifice in your personal life or whether it's a human sacrifice or an animal sacrifice, is believed to have a lot of power. It's believed to be very powerful, and even Aleister Crowley speaks in his writings about the most desirable sacrifice for raising the most spiritual power is to spill the blood of a virgin boy of relative intelligence. So it's definitely there in the background that this has gone on, and the ancient Druids of Ireland anyway, we know that they performed human sacrifice. That goes without saying. So, I know that there's good Druidic.
Can I ask?
How do we know? Because it's in our history. we have a place in Ireland called Ardnagraina, which is the place of the sun that was known as a pagan, a place of pagan worship and sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's an animal being sacrificed or a cow, that did happen during Baltan, or human beings. These things did happen. You know, even in the Wicker Man, which is a portrayal of modern paganism, but it's supposed to be relating back to the old ways. You've got the Wicker Man, where they used to, you know, build this wooden structure and put their sacrificial victims in it because of the belief in the energy of it, that to give this blood or to give this life to the cosmos, to, you know, the Great Spirit, whatever way you want to look at it, in return for let's get good crops next year, you know.
I agree. I'm trying to draw the line between those ridiculous, insane extremes like that, and those who are pursuing the Hermetic tradition, for want of a better word. Again, you could perhaps reflect it upon the and I just use the Christian Church as an example. You could go to any of them, but you know, the history of the Christian Church is nothing but burnings and all.
Well, I think when it comes to the Vatican, there's a lot of what you could describe as satanic practices, and I personally would delineate between Christian teachings and the actions of the Vatican, because they don't sync up in the same way that you would say the Hermetic teachings don't sync up with what Satanists would do. But I think in Hermeticism there's more moral subjectivism. Well, not Hermeticism, but in that sort of path, there's more moral subjectivism. You've got the black and white of the checker floor in Freemasonry, that, you know, evil is good because it complements the good in the world, and you need to have evil to balance the good, and if you do an evil act you can give to charity to balance off your karma, and all of this sort of thing, like, so, you know, I think that if, I'm not saying Freemasons are bad or any particular group are bad, but it potentially opens up the mind to the possibility of doing acts that you might not necessarily consider okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't dispute that. I wouldn't dispute that at all. And you see, I'm no expert on religion or whatever. I can only speak on my own experience of these things. And it's always kind of amused me that in meeting, and I've got many Christian friends and so on, and I don't have an issue with any religion at all, until they start using that religion as the be-all and end-all, and start abusing those who don't comply with what they think and so on. And the same could be said of any religion. Now that to me is just nihilism and ignorance and so on, and every religion is guilty of it, including the Hermetic traditions and so on. I mean, this is what history's sort of peppered with. But the whole point is, for me, that it's very much a distraction. Because if, as you obviously have, you go and research the Hermetic traditions and beyond that into the natural sciences that underlie them and so on, you kind of get to see that all of this stuff that repeatedly has cropped up throughout history, only to be crushed again. Every time the Hermetic tradition comes up into the real world, it ends up in a war. And I suspect that's exactly what will happen again this time. But these Hermetic traditions, I believe, for decades have been used to almost net or ensnare good people with good spiritual intentions, who want to investigate their own spirituality or investigate the nature of the world and reality and so on. It's almost like a netting operation, so that these people are put in there, given lots of useful knowledge and information, and there's no restriction within the Druid orders. You can do what you want and research what you want. It's about love and peace and so on. But I think they're being used insofar as they will never, ever... Well, let's put it this way. There's not a Druid out there who wouldn't want to put the world right. And the same could be said of a Christian and a Muslim or anything. They want to put the world right. So how do you do that? Well, you can look at all the religions and start arguing between each other, or you can realize that, in fact, whatever the truth, there's one ultimate truth, and probably many descriptions of it. That's all that these religions are. Ultimately, the truth is that we live in a world that is corrupt and has intentionally been corrupted by a group of people who have a knowledge that has enabled them to literally create something out of nothing. This is magic. Money is magic. It's one of their spells. Law is the other one, and language and law. And they cast these spells. It's a very real process.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it is observable as well. Like, and hopefully we'll get into that in a little bit. But just what you were saying there reminded me. We had a guest on last night, Tom Sheridan, and he was talking about cults, and he made the point that a lot of cults starting in the 60s and 70s, how they were actually set up by intelligence agencies for the very purpose what you described there, to sort of siphon off people who would have been legitimate dissent, who are ideological, who had, you know, a feeling that they wanted to do something about the problems in the world, and they're sort of distracted into these belief systems, whatever it may be, to sort of to harness that energy and direct it away from their truth.
I agree entirely. That's why I left the Druid Order. I didn't fall out with them. I just simply realised that I was right. And they were being slightly misled, or even misled. They're not being misled. They're just being filtered, as you say, down another track. Because the way to put this world right is to take these magi, and I do believe that they are the magi of history.
Yeah.
They believe they are anyway, and they perform this spell which enslaves humanity. Now we can break that spell. I really have struggled in the last 5 years because there's so many complex subjects surrounding this, but it's all so simple actually. The bottom line is a group of criminal scum have taken control of our financial system and create poverty and war. We all know this. Anyone who's looked at this knows this stuff now. So I don't really see what the issue is. What they're doing is a crime. It's even legislated against in UK statute law, and they breached all of that as well. So we could drag them into a court screaming and they couldn't possibly win a case. They know this. They will kill anyone who gets in the way. Ultimately, we as people need to stand up and kick them out. And we need ultimately to do whatever it takes to do that. I truly do see this as the last battle. Humanity cannot be free unless we remove this evil. And the thing is that if you expose this evil, imagine you could stand in the middle of the town square and people are gathering round. It's such a simple thing to explain to them that some private group is issuing your currency and lending it to you, whereas in fact tomorrow we can do differently. And when you look back through history, when it has been done differently, people prosper. There is no poverty. Everything can be put right. Everything can be put right. I believe that. And the only way it can be done is to get rid of these people and to issue our currency as a credit note in the way it was always intended to be. Now I find there's a lot of obfuscation over this with 27 different financial systems. Everyone's got their notions about whether it should be barter or whether we should have this system or that system or the mathematically perfected economy or blah, blah, blah. Well, that's all great. That's a debate to be had later. Let's just get rid of the criminals. We can put this right tomorrow.
But you said you make an interesting point about bringing them into court. Now, I have a background in law myself, and I've actually done a bit of work into this idea of linking the system, the state, and the idea of magic. And you say magi, and when I think of magi and I think of the courts, the word magi straight pops into my head straight away. And I think, like, it would be great if we had a justice system, or a system where the rule of law was upheld, where we could actually hold these people to account. But when you look at the use of language in the legal system and the state, it is part of the magic spell. So, like, how can we hold them to account in the system that they've created themselves?
Exactly, mate. I agree entirely. I was talking metaphorically. If we could drag them into a court, we know in reality the court would just let them go.
Yeah.
So, can I ask you then, what is the alternative? Because to me, there's only one, ultimately. If the courts aren't going to do it because the courts are corrupt, not necessarily all the people in it, they probably think you are mad for suggesting it, but we know they are.
The alternative that I think, and I know it might sound a bit wishy-washy, but it's sort of like they have used their words and their power to create this reality, this world paradigm that we're in now. And I think a lot of energy is expended in the truth movement and in the activism movement in general in trying to change that system as it is. But we can't really do that. What we need to do is use our words and use our power and our energy to create a brand new system.
Exactly. But I have suggested that, in fact, as a truth movement, we all need to come together, only to hear the howls of derision saying, no, we can't do that because then we'll give them something to attack. And I'm kind of reminded of the Maquis, the French resistance. I can imagine their conversations saying, well, no, let's not come together. Let's not attack them. You see, the way I see this is, I think we're in agreement. Even if we lined these people up and dragged them into a court, we'd just be humiliated at the end of the day. Because the judges, many of them, are as corrupt as hell. They're just part of the system. So our MPs, our representatives, are guilty either of complete ignorance, in which case they should be removed anyway, or complicity. There are no other options.
Yeah.
So we need to remove our supposed leadership too. We also know that democracy is just a mockery of a word. If you read Plato, I think it was the Republic, where he discusses democracy, he says it can't possibly work in a city-state larger than 100,000 people. So go figure. Our entire system supposedly is based on a system that cannot ever work.
It's mob rule at the end of the day, isn't it? You can't justify taking away the rights of 49% of the people in any case.
Of course, and we've all woken up to this, and it's quite disturbing. But I've always, well, for many years, tried to look at it from the perspective of, right, we know what the problem is, and we do. And I have to say this, to me, and please hear this out before you judge it, to me the problem is not paedophile rings, it's not corrupt politicians, it's not satanic child sacrifice rings or anything like that. They all need pursuing, they all need closing down. But you can only go so far with that kind of thing, as we're watching, for example, with the paedophile rings at the moment. It's all the token media personalities, most of them dead already, who are being thrown to the wolves. There's too many distractions, and I believe this is intentional, because let's take the paedophile thing. That's been pretty much exposed, but the public still don't really wake up to it. It's too big and too enormous. We, as a truth movement, can all agree on one thing. I've never met anyone who disagrees with this, so my question to the truth movement is, if we all agree on one thing, then why the hell don't we focus on it? And that one thing is that the people doing this to us actually issue our currency and control the world that way, by draining the resources of the planet and our own resources and energy for their benefit. So we could all come together and highlight that. We don't need a political campaign as such, because that would do no good. There's no such thing as democracy. I'm not campaigning politically to have our currency issued debt-free as a credit note. No, I'm not campaigning politically. I'm saying these bastards are committing a crime. And those MPs or representatives who either don't realize that or are complicit in it need to be removed as well. So how can we do that? Now, I believe that if we come together and as a truth movement and focus primarily on the issuance of the currency and highlighting the great crime that's taking place and how it can be put right tomorrow, and the Bradbury Pound campaign from UK Column kind of touches on this, but again, that's just one campaign, but it should in fact be the focus of the entire movement around the entire world. And the day that happens, this lot comes tumbling down. So how do we come together? How do we actually organize and strategize? And again, I'm just wittering here, but I've pondered this for years. The enemy are experts of, you could call it chess. You've seen the chessboard and the checkerboard all the time. It's not just symbolic of black and white. It's symbolic of the square of the octave, 64, and so on the chessboard. This is their numbers. This is where they get their energy from in the first place. And they are masters of chess, as we see. They play us. We might think we've wised up, but I wouldn't mind betting that we haven't. We think we don't know much more than they want us to know, as a general rule, as a movement. I'm not on about individuals or whatever. So I think that we should stop calling it a truth movement, call it a resistance, and do what any decent resistance does do. And it goes to war. And I don't mean fighting or anything like that, but there's an awful lot we can do. We can shut this system down anytime we want to if we come together to do it.
Absolutely. The phrase global non-compliance springs to mind.
It does, but better still, give me 100,000 people and take me to Temple Bar and we'll go in and literally unwind their spell. You see, every spell has a counter spell. And they're terrified of that.
Can we talk a bit about that then? Because obviously your background, you have some background in finance and your background in Hermeticism. At what point did you start to marry the two together? And, you know, how would you, let's say somebody has never heard of Hermeticism before, how would you explain to them how the money system is a spell being cast upon us?
Oh, well, that's a very good question, a very difficult answer. But it's to do with... see if I can find the words. Well, actually, I'll quote Joseph P. Farrell on this one, I think. The ancient metaphor, the nature of reality, the same and the other. It's through the manipulation or the understanding of the duality that they have in their religion, which actually is a false religion, I would hasten to add. Anyone who studies Hermetic law can sharp realize that this world is not just based on two opposites, but that's another thing. It's a hard one to put into words. This metaphor of reality, this ancient metaphor of the same and the other, and how one can transmute into the other, and that transmutation process, which is natural science, it really is about that. You see, there's two systems in science. Global warming, for example, nowadays, all the rubbish we're told about that. Everything they believe is based on the fact that we live in a closed system. But we don't. We live in an open system. We have, as a result of living in a closed system, or their closed system, we have a closed financial system, which means that resources will always be scarce, and everything that you gain, I must lose, or vice versa, because it's modeled on that ancient metaphor, which in fact is only 2/3 of the story.
And of course, belief comes into this largely as well. Like, you know, people's belief that you can take a piece of paper and you can put certain colourful images on it, and you can stick a picture of the Queen, or you can stick some EU images on it. They bring it into the temple, the modern temple of the central bank. The high priest bless it, let's say, to use the analogy. They send this out into the world, and people then believe that this piece of paper, which is basically marked with sigils and so on, has some sort of added power to it, has some sort of added energy to it, aside from the fact that it's just a piece of paper issued by somebody else. And it really, fundamentally, that's something I talk about a lot, is how much of the system, that the power grid, rests on our belief and acceptance that it has this control over us.
Yeah, by putting their sigils on it, it does actually impart that power. I mean, tracking it back through history, you had the scenario where you had the temples, as in the priests of whatever religion, but take it back to Egypt, or
you even have the temple of Moneta, isn't it? Where the word apparently money comes from, and that's exactly what happened there. They used to bring their talismans to the priest and bless it, and they believed that the stone or the object now had some special significance.
Exactly, and you found that the temples and the gold brokers, for want of a better word, came together. They realized that together they actually were very, very powerful, because the people would obey the temple, and if the temple said obey, use this money, this is how it works, then that's how it worked. And nothing ever changed since. The power brokers, the money brokers, they work through the temple to this very day. Hence Temple Bar, the inner temple, etc., etc. Yeah. But extending that, the temple, of course, is the church itself. Very, very much, I believe, now you can't prove this, but anyone who goes and looks at the story, it kind of falls into place that you have a Jesuit order running the world today through the Roman Catholic Church. And that's not to decry Catholicism or Christianity or whatever. There's just a bunch of nasty pasties whose sole mission is to destroy anyone who doesn't believe their way and to take control of the system in the way that they have done. So ultimately, again, it doesn't matter whether they're Jesuits, whether they're Druids, one and the same thing, you could argue, in terms of understanding. Yeah. Whether they're lizards, it really doesn't matter, you see, because they issue our currency as a debt. That can and must stop tomorrow. And nobody could defend it. If we had the Prime Minister on now talking to us, and we asked him what he thought about it, he couldn't rationalise it or defend it in any way. He could only add weight to the fact that, yes, he's part of a criminal group, an elite group, who just don't want us, the peasants, to know about this. Because the day we do, they stop benefiting. The only time things changed in history is when the people themselves got up and did something. The peasants' revolt in this country, they picked up pitchforks and went to London. We can't do that nowadays, and I'm not suggesting we should. I don't think we need to. But I do think that we have, we can be righteously indignant. We are committing no crime if we come together with the sole intention of removing high criminality from our government. That's what they are, and we must call them out.
Yeah, I think you're making a very valid point. No matter what group you want to, focus on in terms of the control structure, what they all have in common is that they're unified by a single principle, which is the enslavement of the human race. And because they have that unifying principle, it doesn't matter so much that they differ in the details. They're unified by that principle, and that's perhaps what we're lacking as a troop movement, or as the people, is that we don't have a unifying principle that we're all working towards, and we are actually focusing entirely on the details of the gold standard or the mathematically perfected economy or whatever it is. And we get so hung up in the details that we're not really getting anywhere, or we are getting somewhere but not fast enough and not hard enough, because we're not unified on this single principle.
That's right. So when are we going to be unified? Do we wait 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Only to look back and think, God, if we'd done it sooner, we might just have got rid of them. Because at the end of the day, that's all they are. They are masters of twisting reality, just like the Venetian bankers were originally. This is how they did it. They twist reality. And they know how to do it. They know how the human mind works. They know how intelligence works. They have the best intelligence networks on the planet. So they can manipulate your reality through your daily news, etc. We all know this kind of thing now. But they manipulate the reality of other governments, other leaders. And if they fail to manipulate them, then they can always step in and kill them. This is the way it works. Now, we can't, you see, if we change this tomorrow, we would still have the issue of the mob, for example, criminality, the mafia, you call it what you want, crime. We can't put all of that right. But if we issue our own currency, that kind of thing kind of takes care of itself over a generation. Because if you have no motivation for greed or excess profit, which you couldn't have under that sort of system, and everybody has all of the basics that they need to live, and a lot more, it's hard to do the sums on this, but my understanding, and that of many I've spoken to over decades, is that if this was put right tomorrow, every single person on this planet could live what we broadly call a Western middle-class lifestyle, whatever that actually means.
How do you think, how do we get everybody to unify under a certain,
by doing
this principle, with respect to people's individuality and free will, and the fact that we aren't going to necessarily agree on all the details? Like, how do we get behind this one principle?
Do we all agree? Sorry to butt in there, but do we all agree? And I know you can't speak for everyone, but you know, I've never found an exception. Do we all agree that it is through the issuance of our currency that everything is and has been manipulated? And when you do realize that's the one thing that all sectors of this movement agree on. So we should focus on that, highlight it, remove it, and ultimately go to whatever lengths are required to remove it. I, in my time, have met, well, let's not go into detail, but a number of people who firmly believe that they are here to remove these criminals. There are even those who would call themselves the Knights Temporal. I'm sorry, I'm very croaky. I don't know if that came out, but I said...
No, yeah. What's the Knights Temporal? Is it the Knights of Earth sort of thing, or temporal realm, or...?
No, these are people who, for whatever reason, believe that in reincarnation, for example, and might believe that they have come back to do just this, and that they might have done it before. Now, as I say, I've met, let's just say, a number of people in the UK alone who believe that, and are dedicated to giving their lives to remove this evil, whatever that actually means. You see, they've taken possession and control of this country and other countries to a far better degree than any invading army ever could have done.
Yeah, I agree with that, absolutely.
We need to treat it as an invading army. They are criminals. They are the enemy. And going back to chess, they are the masters of chess. They are many moves ahead of us all the time. But it's always tickled me. I can never say his name. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Refers to two games. One is chess. The other is, its Western name is Go. And that game requires a strategy whereby you take as much ground as you can in all different fields. Now, that reminds me of the truth movement. We have experts in so many different and diverse fields. We have all ground covered, just not in strength. Now, an army who was playing to the rules of Go would then stage incursions where it hurt most, where you hurt the enemy most. And you apply your resources to that, and then you retreat and move, and then apply your resources to hitting them again where it hurts the most in another field. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's all we could ever do, and I'm not on about terrorist activities here. I'm on about...
That's obviously never going to get us anywhere, but yeah, I see what you're saying. It's a sort of a mental strategy, and more energetic in a sense.
Too right, but imagine this. Imagine that tomorrow... I don't know where you're sat now, but imagine that you had every union leader from the UK, the major unions, sat with you. And you just spent half an hour discussing the banking scam with them and the issuance of the currency, and they all got it, They all think, wow, yes, right, the future for our workers then, it doesn't depend upon voting Labour or getting the Tories in or any of this crap. It actually is very simple. We issue our own currency, then our own workers are no longer slaves to the system. Imagine if every union leader then went out and said, right, we're calling a general strike until our currency is issued as a credit note. And this is why. And they tell the people why they're doing it. Oh, things would change overnight. Now, you could argue that maybe they wouldn't change because this is a powerful enemy. But my point is, this movement changes the second it even attempts to bring those, for example, union leaders together. This movement has then entered their domain, and we are hurting them. Do you follow me? That's one thing we can do.
You're really taking back the power from the source.
Yeah, exactly. And then we move, we retreat from there, and having discussed it as a movement at a conference, and it doesn't matter whether we are infiltrated or not, because of course we are. We just accept that. It doesn't matter. And then we focus on another thing. We use all our resources to do it, and we hurt them. We could, for example, focus on certain journalists or media outlets. And there are many things that can be done, as arguably Anonymous are proving nowadays, to actually hurt them, if you follow me. It's not for me to say how this can be done.
Can I jump in here a second?
Yeah.
But you were talking earlier on just there about kind of these other Templars that were, here to bring about the change. So, it's kind of come out more recently that Anonymous is pretty much, I was reading this yesterday, that most of the people in Anonymous are inside the American military.
It wouldn't surprise me, yeah.
Yeah, it's a secret military operation by the kind of the white hats in the military.
Of course.
And that this, the kind of the White Knights. There's this kind of movement at the moment. It's kind of, there's always kind of rumblings that they've infiltrated every aspect of kind of government the way the dark ones do. They infiltrate and then manipulate, and that there's a lot of actually very strategic double agents in play right now around the world. That a lot of,
I think there are. I mean,
and they're waiting for the go to actually swoop and do.
I've said this from day one. That those I have spoken to, in positions where they could do anything, I guess. The response has always been, "That's great. Yeah, we must do this." But I can't stand up and do it because I'll be out and replaced tomorrow. And he can't stand up and do it either because he'll be out and replaced tomorrow. What is needed is for the people to stand up, and then all of these factions can add their support to it.
Yeah.
And it's actually logical if you think about it. It's also logical that they could let us down and not be there to support us. I don't think that would happen, but even if it did, it doesn't matter. Because my children and your children, everybody is being screwed rotten by these criminals.
But the majority of the kind of the man or woman on the street, especially here in Ireland, there's kind of people in the truth movement who've been shouting about this for nearly a decade now, but they are so kind of bet down. If I've talked to people and I've talk exactly about this, about changing the printing up of money and give it back to the treasury of a country, not the whatever. And they're going, yeah, that all sounds great, but what can we do? There's nothing we can do. We can't stand up. We just get better. It's but almost you can't. I know. I believe there is. You believe there is. But to get into the consciousness, the mass consciousness of people, they've been bet down so often. There's just this kind of this apathy, this kind of almost giving up
mentality.
Yeah. It's like,
okay. Well, I have suggested before, and it was just a thought and a suggestion. But I've mentioned Temple Bar. this is the location. Actually, the original location is the location, but let's not get bogged down. Imagine a scenario whereby yesterday some people had taken or occupied Temple Bar. Never mind St. Paul's, incidentally. What a waste. Temple Bar was just down the road. Go and occupy their headquarters, see if they like it, yeah? Whilst we're there, we'll unwind the spell that they're doing as well. We can cause them so much trouble. Imagine that we had occupied, or someone had occupied that, and you've got the media baying outside, like, who are you? What are you doing? Well, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be interested in speaking to the media. They can sod off, basically. They're not needed. But at some point, they would be coming along and asking the questions, in which case we'd give them the answer straight to the public. This government is caught up in a serious international criminal activity whereby they issue our currency as a debt. And indeed, tomorrow it could be changed so that we do not have these debts, we do not have poverty, and ultimately we don't even have interest on loans. We don't have taxation. But of course, at this point, you lose people because they've been taught to believe that that's just insane, that there are two things certain in life. One is taxation and the other is death. Well, no. You can look back through history and there was not taxation, not in the way that we know it. So imagine that had been taken yesterday and that the press were baying at the door and we were telling them, and the people were hearing this message, and we would be saying, we will leave here. We are doing this for peace and love, and we will leave here tomorrow, or we'll leave here in 5 minutes. But the government must step forward. It must send a representative forward and explain to the people of this country why they allow a private institution to issue our currency as a debt, when in fact it can be issued as a debt-free credit note tomorrow. Now come and explain yourself. If you can give an explanation, we won't even judge that explanation. We just want to hear it because you owe it to the people. And if you don't, then it tells us everything we need to know. And from there, you're a little bit stuck, I guess, because at what point do we go to war? Eh? At what point do people get up and go to war against the occupying enemy? This isn't politics. This is not politics. And again, I'm using the word war in inverted commas. But ultimately, if this isn't put right by the people, then we're going to enter another millennia of slavery. Far worse, because now it's all monitored electronically and so on, as we know. When are we going to do it? Well, I'm going to do it in this lifetime. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
But there are many people who have now decided that if they have to, and this isn't noble bull, it's not noble at all. It's people who've been driven by desperation in many cases. But we must stand up, we must come together as a movement, and we must go and challenge these criminals on that one issue. One issue. I wouldn't want to see banners about paedophiles or anything else. Just that one issue. In fact, I wouldn't want to see banners at all. They're not needed. So I believe this for a long, long time. When you're in an impossible situation, well, let's bring about the one thing that they cannot face out. They cannot confront this in public, so we have to make them do it. Do you follow me?
Yeah.
And if they want to attack us, well, that would be sad, but I'm prepared for that. And I guess many others would be. I suggested last year, because I've always thought it's the women of this country who'll make the difference. It often is. That the women should stand out front with their children when we take Temple Bar or anywhere. And then, of course, the comment was thrown at me, well, that's not very brave, is it, putting the women out? I think they missed my point. Because if the women wanted to come together with their children in the front lines and the police wanted to attack them, then I think all the men behind would be well justified in what followed.
But
now I know that's fairly insightful speak, but at what point isn't that going to happen? Because 10 years from now, it will. I believe if we don't put this right, they will incite a revolution in this country whereby they can clamp down and we'll never even have the shadow of democracy again.
Well, it seems like that's what they're trying to do as it is. Like, seems they're just trying to push people to the limit. Like, so I firmly maintain that violence, isn't the way forward. But it's sort of like, I remember I listened to Mark Passio recently, and he described it. Well, it's not violence; it's defense. From what has been the attack that's been sort of perpetrated against people for so many years.
Exactly. I mean, if we were there in numbers, on this principle of getting the currency issued debt-free tomorrow, and they wanted to attack us on that, then I would happily stand there and take those punches, because I know that the people of this country are looking on and wondering, well, hang on, these don't look like a bunch of yob left-wing protester, you know what I mean? Yelling, demanding this, demanding that. Occupy St. Paul's was a bloody joke. I was talking.
Yeah, well, we had an Occupy over here in Ireland, and it was incidentally in Temple Bar at the Central Bank, and once a certain number of protesters or activists arrived, the camp was cordoned off. It couldn't get any bigger than it was, and it lasted for a number of weeks before. What invariably happens is they sent in the thugs, they sent in the old boys in blue, and actually over here they wear yellow because they're all yellow. Really, they're cowards, and they just ripped the place apart, reefed people out of their tents, took all the equipment, and just basically left them there.
I know, but the media were asking various individuals, "What is it you're protesting about?" And they all had a different thing. Do you see? So why should the public at large give a stuff about that? They'll just be viewed as left-wing radicals, wouldn't they? I'm talking. So, and indeed they were. And indeed many of them were left-wing radicals. Again, political. I mean, if you, and I don't mean you guys here, but generally, if one has not woken up to the falsehood of this left-right politics in this country, then you've got a harsh awakening coming. It goes so far beyond that. So whether you're left, right, middle, indifferent, whatever, there's one thing you cannot deny, and that is that these people issuing our currency need to be removed. Now, if the government isn't going to do it, that makes them complicit. And I bet there's not a single person in government who, once they understood this, wouldn't support it. Us, that is. Most of them don't understand it. My MP was so bloody thick that he couldn't grasp the simple concept. He finally did, and then openly admitted he hasn't got the balls to do anything about it, because he'll be coming up to his retirement in the next 5 or 6 years. So I've pointed out to him that if he thinks he's going to retire into one of his 3 houses in peace and quiet, whilst we have to do the job that he has been paid a lifetime to do, then think again. Because at that point, surely a truth movement does turn into a resistance movement.
Yeah.
But in England, though, it's slightly different, because your currency isn't tied into the EU.
I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference, to be honest, Anthony, because it's all...
It gives our politicians more kind of apathy to go, well, it was nothing we can do, we're under
Yeah.
They're one step
removed. To do nothing is that,
Yeah, but you see, they've been paid 80,000 quid a year, plus all their fiddled expenses and so on, to do all of this.
Ours get a lot more than that, trust me.
I know.
Politicians get...
But, as I said to my MP, I've lost my source of income. And many others have. It's not just me, but we've lost bloody everything because we're doing their job for them. Now get off your ass, stand up and do what you're supposed to do. But he won't, and none of them will. So they need removing, because it's as simple as this: they are sheltering criminals. No one could deny that. No court could deny that. So at what point do the people take it into their own hands and sort this out?
Yeah.
And I do mean peacefully. But if I'm attacked, I'll bloody defend myself. I can tell you that now.
Okay,
because this is the way it goes. But when the people see these good people, I would imagine, with their hands behind their backs, not fighting back, all of us, they'd know this isn't a bunch of left-wing radicals. They would know that the thing that they're all protesting about, they'd think, what's this? Our currency is issued as a debt, but it doesn't have to be. What's this, government? Tell us. What is this? Why are you beating these people up? When actually all they're doing is asking a question. Do you follow me?
Yep.
So, and of course, then there's always the possibility that you'll get interlopers and people coming in deliberately to cause trouble. And I've always said, if we go in utter silence, we can always remove those people ourselves anyway. Ultimately, it's about just doing it. Just, for once, doing it. And then things might change.
We need to go a break now, but which we're going to play when it's on the But
Excuse me.
I agree with all of this, except my fear, I would sort of say, not fear, but my chagrin in it all is motivating people. You know, you always have the small section of society who really would do this, but then, you know, it's still the rest that will just go, oh, you know, what's the point? And it's finding out a way to motivate the rest of the country, you know.
I would agree to some extent, but if you think that you're going to motivate the rest of the country, I'd suggest you think again. You're not. I'm talking about drawing upon those who already are motivated. We do not have time to wake other people up to this. Against the largest counterintelligence operation ever unleashed on us, it's a hell of an uphill struggle. I think we have enough to create such a stir and to create a focus on one issue that they cannot defend. And I've suggested that we come together. There's even a well-known spiral management system by which this can be done.
Sorry, I've gone out of the room here. They're playing and making a lot of noise. Okay, will we go for a break?
Okay.
Yeah, you were going to play one of your own tracks, Mark. I think bringing back the Bradbury Pound, I think it's a great time to play it. Did you want to give us a bit of background on that song?
Yeah, this is my mate Ken. I don't know if you're listening, Ken, but hello there. Ken Pearson up in Newcastle. We had a session a few weeks ago. I thought it would be, it was fun. It's life's heavy at the minute. We thought it would be fun to do a Bradbury Pound campaign song. And we're both rockers with flares on, so this was it.
Okay, well, I'll go and play that now. We'll be back in about 3 minutes there.
Tirnacer.
Door says, be entranced. Signals in the forecourt, puts the devil in your tank. The symbols on the logos play the Rothschild dance. All the way to the central bank. With double meanings from our hidden roots. Politicians' plans like prostitutes in suits. So use your voice, we can break their spell. Send them back to hell. 'Cause we're bringing back the Bradbury. 'Cause we're bringing back the Bradbury. 'Cause we're bringing back the Bradbury. Common purpose pimping platitudes. Bloody politicians for perpetrating news. Bilderberg bollocks, ubiquitous in brood. Music babies in the temple of doom. They steal our children, rape our currency. Block out the secret court appointing the trustee. But we can stop them, we can all be free.
Hi. Okay, well, we're back, and I'm kind of sitting back a good bit in this because it's really kind of Kevin's expertise. But two things. First of all, Mark, I don't know what direction you want to go in now. I'll kind of let you kind of take it away there. But also maybe explain to the people listening what the Bradbury Pound is.
Yeah. The Bradbury Pound, if you go to ukcolumn.org, that's the good old UK column, they're running a Bradbury Pound campaign. I don't think they've actually launched it big time yet, but they will be this year. And it really is about focusing on the criminal activity of the government in issuing our currency as a debt. And the Bradbury Pound was an example of a credit note issued in 1914, which was debt-free and so on. So there is precedent for this, but there's been many precedents throughout history on this one. Excuse me while I cough. Just turned the microphone off there. So, yeah, please go and look at the Bradbury Pound campaign and join it and give them donations, etc., etc. But take note in particular of the principle that lies behind it, because it is the answer. It is the one thing that all of this other obfuscation is put there to hide.
And on that note, what do you think of Bitcoin? Talking about old terms, it just came into my head there because I was watching a thing last night before I went to sleep.
Yeah, they were actually talking about it on the chat box as well, funnily enough, to talk about Bitcoin.
Where, because you can, I mean, Bitcoin is kind of interest free, isn't it? And you can online convert your money to Bitcoin, buy something with Bitcoin, and then with that go back to whatever currency. Or I don't know an awful lot about Bitcoin. I've been hearing about it.
I think it's good. I haven't actually got anything bad to say about Bitcoin. A few concerns. One, what the hell do you do when the power goes off?
Yeah.
Two, I've forgotten what two was now. Two, I've witnessed it being used just like any other currency, and the currency itself being traded for profit. So I find that whole thing quite obscene, really.
Okay.
Sure, isn't that the very reason why Jesus went mental in the temple, is that they were charging interest on the shekels? It comes right back full circle to the idea of charging interest. Making money off the use of money is the definition of usury, banned by all religions in the world and the root of all evil in the banking system.
Exactly. It's to look at the biological equivalent, it's a cancer. When the currency itself becomes the product, that's it. You've got a real issue. When I worked in the building societies, we used to borrow money from investors. So you would pay your 10,000 quid in, and we would then lend it out just once. That's how the mutual building societies work. They borrow money from their savers and investors and lend it out to their borrowers. And if you balance that properly, and the building societies were experts at borrowing short-term and lending long-term, that was quite a good system, a mutual system for the benefit of everyone involved in it. It did work. But then it was destroyed by deregulation and the Big Bang in this country, as they called it, whereby the building societies were given the ability to borrow money, retail, from the banks. So instead of me waiting for you to walk in the door with your 10,000, we'd go to the bank electronically that morning and borrow 200,000 and then lend it out. So it really became a process then of who can borrow the most at least cost. That's all it was. It was the destruction of the system. And a school kid could work out what was going to happen next. Well, this school kid did. And I wasn't alone. You know, I did talk about these things, and many people were aware that there was a tragedy coming, because the product itself, money, had become the product, if you follow me.
Yeah.
And if you start trading on currencies, you see, that is the next step. Once we start issuing our currency debt-free as a credit note, the next step surely has to be to stop any trading on those currencies. It's not necessary. It's an obscenity. It's a cancer. So, and as you can probably tell, because those who do that make a lot of money. And that's your money. Everything they make, someone else has lost. Because it's in a closed financial system. And what we need to do is realize that the metaphor or the model of reality, the physics of reality, is not a closed system. And therefore the financial system that allows for the exchange of goods and energy within that reality should also be an open system.
I've heard it described recently as a sort of an operating system on a computer. And it's like, while we remain on the old operating system of the closed financial system, we are going to be limited on what we can achieve. But in the meantime, there's a new operating system, a new computer sitting in the corner. It's there. The plans are there. The model is there. It's just we haven't figured out how to use it and put it into place yet. So we keep going back to the old operating system.
Yeah, well, exactly. I don't think people have figured out what to do. In fact, that's where we're at. Everyone's confused. There's so many conflicting notions. Do we go back to barter? Well, we go back to barter if everything gets destroyed, surely. But what people don't realize is that barter wasn't the first system anyway. It literally was a side effect of introducing currency. If you go back and do your history, there it is. So when you have usually your left-wing radicals saying, oh, we need a barter system, to me, barter works locally. It doesn't work on a big scale. But it wasn't the first system. It didn't come before currency. It came after it. It was a side effect of the introduction of currencies. That's readily available for anyone to research. Whether they agree with it or not is another thing. But I do. And just about everyone I've met who's involved in that intellectual circle of finance gets that as well. So you could say that's a bit of misinformation out there in the truth movement. But that's for you to pursue for yourself and make your own mind up on. But there's lots of scenarios like that. The mathematically perfected economy, well, that's brilliant. You know, his maths was good, but you put it into a real world scenario where you don't understand the dynamics and the scalar dynamics that apply, which that guy clearly didn't. He called me a snake for pointing something out to him. And I didn't like the fact he was issuing credit cards with his own name on. It's like, come on, dude. You know, what is going on? What is actually going on? Because you can push all this to one side and say, there is no issue here, really. All those other things are peripheral. What we have is a bunch of criminals who are lending you your currency. And we can stop that tomorrow. We can stop it peacefully. We can stop it by waking everyone up in the country to how it's done, but you're never going to do that because if you've noticed, well, it doesn't quite work that way. People are caught up surviving. But it goes beyond that. I would say that the average IQ out there is highly questionable. But that's because everyone's been dumbed down. We know this. We know how it's done nowadays through the education system and so on. But we know so much. We've learned so much over so long. But at what point are we going to say enough? That's my point to the truth movement. I'm not trying to incite a revolution. I'm trying to point out that we're actually involved in one. But no one seems to want to do anything. Well, I do. I think we can go and take these people on in full public view, lovingly, peacefully, but with absolute determination. Because, you know, as I've said before, if you were to realize that John down the road had been breaking into your house every night and stealing your food and your goods and perhaps molesting your children in the process, and today you've realized that all of these things that have gone missing are down to him, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Get online and talk about it with others and try and wake everyone up? Or are you going to take a few people around and beat the living daylights out of him and make sure he doesn't do it again? I don't know what you would do. But what this truth movement isn't doing is making a difference. You might have noticed those
Sorry
of
to
us
put
with
across you there,
history
but I'm
focus.
just getting a message in from the chat that the sound is very crackly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hang up on you guys and then give you a call straight back, okay?
Okay.
Tirnacer.
Yeah, so I was just saying there while the little jingle was playing, I don't mean to disrupt your flow, like if you've got more to say on that, Mark, please do. But
No, not
when
really.
we're ready, maybe like I'd be really interested to hear you talk about like, I've never been good with numbers, it's not my forte, and so it's something that I tend to avoid. But when you look at the liberal arts, the classical education, the second aspect of it is the quadrivium, which obviously deals entirely with numbers. It's mathematics, music, astronomy, and geometry. And when I was watching one of your talks
Kevin,
recently,
the chat box says that the sound is still crap. Sorry.
well, there's nothing I can do, unfortunately.
Okay. Sorry.
Be better on the podcast. That's a shame. But yeah, you were talking about things like the octave and it's gone out of my head now. The apostrophe or something like that.
Oh, the Pythagorean comma.
The Pythagorean comma, yeah, not the apostrophe.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's an apostrophe, really, isn't it? I know what you mean. Yeah, well, the quadrivium. A lot of people are looking at this, and it kind of dawned on me years ago that this is what all those snooty people who end up in government, because they all went to the same class, virtually. They were all there together, and generation after generation, that's the way. But they studied this. This was the old classical education and so on. What they didn't seem to realise was what you pointed out, that the quadrivium is actually all about numbers. Mathematics is numbers, geometry is numbers in space, music is numbers in time, and astronomy is numbers in time and space, if you want to think of it that way. And when you do think of it that way, then you get a kind of different perspective on it, or I did, because it woke me up to the fact that it is all about numbers. Now, anyone who researches the Illuminati, or any that call themselves illuminated, so it doesn't have to be Illuminati, I'm not on about the Bavarian Illuminati, who were quite clearly destroyed and taken over by the Jesuit order anyway, and their principles hijacked. They have one thing in common, and that is a belief in a universal creator, call it what you will, wherein the only reality is number. So numbers are God to them, or certainly God's tool. And I always pursued this, because obviously if you look at the natural sciences, that's very much to do with numbers or geometry or those things we just talked about. But then I used to wonder what it meant, what could it mean if numbers are the only reality? What sort of belief system could that be? And I pondered this for many years and looked at numbers, and of course this gets you into numerology, Kabbalah. It's all the same stuff. It's all the same stuff. It's about the structure and geometry of numbers. That's what it is, and how those things interact in a three-dimensional reality with that reality, and can create that reality. So I think in my last talk I talked about a German scientist who had taken a look at this and actually proven what numbers are. And to cut a long story short, rather than just looking at a whole trail of an infinite stream of numbers in a line, he realized that if you actually circle them round in a 24-hour clock, spiraling up each revolution from the 24, do you follow me? So it's a spiral, but each circle is a 24-hour clock, that there is a distinct pattern arises, and that pattern is what's always been described through history. It's actually the pattern of the prime numbers. And as we know, when you research this nowadays, prime numbers are music. It's the music of the primes is often referred to. It's pure music theory, which of course brings you slap bang back to Hermetic philosophy, if you follow me. So what this scientist has done, and it's there for anyone to see, I would use the word proven because it's there to see. And he's shown the structure behind prime numbers and how this number system literally creates matter. This is your matrix, if you want to think of it that way. It doesn't need beaming from the moon. It doesn't need computer geniuses or aliens to do it. It's a simple structure of numbers that clearly has been known for thousands of years.
And this is why we see the same numbers popping up in all of the old texts, whether it's the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran. You've got the 12 and the 1, the 64 and things like that.
Yeah. It's all there.
It's encoded into our reality.
Yeah, if you put the numbers round in I nearly said ever increasing, that's not right, in circles, in a spiral, 24 on each one, a structure forms. All prime numbers lie on one of 8 rays. Anyone who's researched New Age philosophy will be aware of the 8 rays. All primes lie on those 8 rays. They therefore divide the clock into... it's hard doing this without the pictures in front of me, but they divide the clock into what became the Templar's cross. That's the shape of the Templar's cross. It's my understanding that that's actually where it came from. Doesn't mean it's right, but having heard that and then going to look at it, you kind of sharp realise that, oops, yes, it is. It's all about numbers. And those numbers betray the structure and nature of reality. It is the recipe by which, if you were the creator, that you would be creating this reality. And once you've sussed that, imagine how you can intervene with it. As I say, it doesn't need space aliens sat on the moon to do it.
Well, this kind of reinforces the whole holographic universe thing, that it's all a hologram and a hologram. It's one big hologram. Because holograms are equations, basically. They're made through equations, through mathematical equations. Anyway, I'll pull out on that.
Yeah, well, the equations are just a level of complexity. What this does is it brings it to a level where any I keep saying 6-year-old, but maybe that's not fair, where a 12-year-old could understand the nature of reality and do things with numbers that most adults today couldn't even dream of doing. This knowledge is there, and it's only ever taught to a few. The inverse square law, that thing that messes everyone up in their physics class. Why should an inverse square law apply in reality? And then when you look at the numbers, the way they're laid out, you realize that the inverse square law is simply the addition of odd numbers. So I think I misquoted it in my last talk, actually. What I meant to say was, for example, the sum of the first 5 odd numbers is 5 squared. The sum of the first 9 odd numbers is 9 squared, and so on. So you can do all these little tricks, but it goes way, way beyond that, because what the scientist has proven is that it unifies all the sciences, maths, physics, chemistry, geometry, etc., all into one understandable by a 16-year-old kind of science. And it is there for anyone to go see. Now, when he wrote about this in 93, I think it was, he said that he felt he had a duty to try and write it down in an understandable form and publish it direct to the public, because he was handing it over to the Jesuits.
Now, who is he? Sorry.
His name is Peter Plichter.
Okay.
Plichta. And again, if you go and research this, you'll find very, very little out there. Suspiciously little. But read the book, make of it what you will. Go do it. At the end of the day, though, it brings you to a simple understanding that numbers are the reality that lie behind everything. But you will see the patterns of those numbers in doing it.
There's another thing... Sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to kind of bring that into... his name's gone. John Dee.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The Queen's conjurer, John Dee.
He's a very interesting individual in history, I have to say.
Oh, that's it. The Queen Elizabeth I called on him 3 times. And I was just reading, a good friend of mine gave me a book a few weeks ago. And in that book, there's a description. Excuse me just one second, I'm about to... Sorry, I'm still very croaky tonight. There's a description in there of the Queen being very impressed by his magic mirror. And there's a description of how she stood in front of it with a dagger and pretended to stab herself, and how the same hand came back at her. So that's obviously not a mirror, because it's the opposite hand that comes back at you in a mirror. And this is, I can't prove it, but quite clearly to me, this is Plato's mirror. This is what's described by Plato. And it's a way of literally constructing the geometry of space and time by putting 2 mirrors together. So it's x squared, y squared geometry, which there's not many studies on nowadays. But my point is, you can go all the way back to John Dee and find out that that's in fact what he was doing. So Plato made the mirror, John Dee made the mirror, I've made the mirror years ago. It wasn't a very good one, but it did have the effect. I'd love to do it myself. And you do this by putting 2 mirrors together at 90 degrees. If you sit in front of it, not only and then meditate, you've got to get into a receptive brain state. But then the things that you are thinking about will appear in the space between your head and the mirror. And that will be visible to onlookers. Now that's quite profound. And this is an experiment that has been done and is documented and recorded. And as I say, just stumbled across it almost randomly with John Dee here as well. So this is a very real thing. This knowledge has been known. And Peter Plichter in his book calls his prime number cross, as he's called it, subtitles it the space mirror. This is what John Dee had. I'm quite convinced. So it's been known.
Yeah,
for a long time.
And he had an accomplice as well, didn't he, John Dee? Ed Kelly.
Yeah.
These guys there's some brilliant old ink drawings of them doing their Enochian magic, summoning up their spirits for information, and they're very interested in pursuing the Philosopher's Stone. And I know that they were heavily coveted, these 2 guys, by the royals of Europe at the time, very interested in their work, commissioned a lot, but let's not forget that the both of them ended up going mad at the end of it. And John Dee, even in his writings, came to the conclusion that these spirits that he was talking to and engaging with were liars.
That's it.
At the end.
And this is kind of the point.
The archons.
Exactly. And it was actually the spirits, if I remember correctly, that he was communicating with, kept asking them to do things to sort of show their loyalty or their commitment. And that they were worthy for this information, a little bit like the initiation process. But the last straw was that the spirits had asked them to sleep with each other's wives.
That's right, yeah.
And they did this, which at the time, and even today, in a Christian world, as it was at the time, was a complete act of depravity. So it was almost like these spirits were leading them away from moral objectivism into a sort of depraved acts in order to get to this information.
And that is the motto of the Illuminati: sin for salvation.
Fascinating.
There's one to ponder. But so we have a history here, and don't lose sight of the fact that it was Queen Elizabeth I who, on the back, arguably, of John Dee, because he was the one who instructed her how to set up the empire and so on.
As far as I know, he came up with the phrase, the British Empire.
Yeah, he did. So he's the man. But a good man. I can't see anything bad in anything that he did. He even realised that what he had been doing was dabbling with things he shouldn't dabble with. Now, which brings me to those in the modern era who claim, well, who patently did get information through channeled sources. Yeah? Now, I've done this. I'm well aware of this process. So I'm not poo-pooing that at all. At all. In fact, that's what Druidry was about, to some degree. Was doing that. But, excuse me, I kind of learned long ago, you don't play around with it.
Yeah.
And you don't. And these beings will mislead you. It's almost like that's their intent and purpose. Anyone who's ever done this, I mean, was it not who were we talking about before? Sorry, who?
Crowley.
Crowley, yeah, thank you. On his deathbed, his last words were, I've forgotten it now. It wasn't "I'm confused." Sorry, it slipped. But basically, that's what he was saying. He was a bit baffled because
you're talking about the channeling, right? Where it's kind of letting an entity come into you, which is pretty bad. You shouldn't. I mean, I know from.
But you see that in church every day.
Yeah,
You go
no,
to
but
any church and you see entities coming through people, don't you?
The thing about secret these kind of secret services being behind a lot of the New Age and infiltrating.
Very much so.
But I mean, there's whistleblowers that have come out, who've worked for sort of USA Black Ops and secret space programs and all this kind of thing, who really proven that they were working in these kind of secret areas of science and for the military, who claim that they have such high-tech technology that they can actually, what they call canned channeling, that they can bounce sort of things off satellites. Now, not saying that these are archonic and spirits and all these things aren't around there. Of course they are and can be manipulated, but that the secret services have actually perfected it. I mean, I know they work with these things as well.
Well, it'd be an evolution of John Dee, because isn't he 007? That's who used to sign his letters, 007, Her Majesty's Special Service.
Secret Service too is apparently bounce stuff off, someone who's a sensitive and would pick up, could channel a spirit easily, come in and pretend that they're sort of Santa, I don't know, the Lord, one of the ascended masters or whatever, and start channeling. And it's not even a spirit at this time, it's literally modern technology making that person think they're channeling an entity, and it's in fact what they call canned channeling, and it's CIA kind of on loop stuff, which is telling that person it's a special entity and this is what you got to say, and it's all done kind of electronically through kind of scalar manipulation. Now, this isn't all channeling. I'm just talking about that the secret services have perfected their manipulation so much that they can even come in and pretend to be an entity inside a channeler.
I think the moral of the story is don't dabble in channeling.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's a very real process, and a lot of good can come out of it, but equal bad, I guess. It's something that you really need to be aware of, and there have been those around in recent years. Well, all the time you've had Blavatsky and so on. There's always been someone there who's been receiving channeled information. But, it's how it's interpreted and so on. At the end of the day, I don't think we need channeled information. We should have everything at our fingertips already.
Yeah, well, we're connected to the source, whatever that is.
That's called data streaming, isn't it? Downloading, when you're not channeling, but you...
Well, even that aside, we all have creative input and we all can tap into inspiration.
I'm not saying it's in a bad way. It's a good thing. When you kind of, without channeling an entity, you get these wonderful kind of wow moments.
Yeah.
Receive light and the source sort of fractally, you remember stuff or you're picking up information yourself.
Eureka moments, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a different thing, though. That's, I think, downloading.
That's it. Where does a songwriter get their words from, or that brilliant hook line, or whatever it is? Where does that come from? You could say it's channeled. Many musicians over the years say, well, I don't know where it came from. So it just came out of the ether and so on. So again, what does channeled mean?
I think channeled is when you allow an entity to come into your body and take you believe it's taking you over and speaking through you or whatever. Not kind of, meditating and tuning into whatever you can download and come through you.
Yes.
I think that's the difference with channeling and.
Yeah, it's probably a good way of defining it. But I'm very concerned with this because you do look back through history and nothing's new. There is nothing happening today that hasn't happened many times throughout history. The same discussions, the same debates about the bankers taking controlling the currency, the wars and the evil that comes out of it. The people have questioned this before. And, without being specific, it is all there. And we're just on another repeat run. And I suspect that the outcome will be the same. Because these people are masters of manipulation and they've done it for millennia. And they have a pretty powerful toolbox to do it. Not least of which is our own ignorance. I mean, humans are so fickle and ignorant and ego-driven, generally, that we must be easy to manipulate. And now that they have financial control over us, and that is what's falling into place around the world now, is an inescapable financial net that works solely to their advantage. And I don't think we'll ever get out of this unless we do it now. Let's face it, we are entering into an age of... it's that Orwellian post-apocalyptic nightmare scenario, isn't it? But it's all there. And the technology is there and it will be used against us. It already is. At what point do people wake up to this? Enough has to be enough. And I think that there's enough good people in this country already to stand up and make such a spectacle, a peaceful, loving spectacle, that is not trying to preach or tell anybody anything, is not protesting about anything. It is simply wanting to ask a question of the government. And we can put that question out there publicly to any who are interested in it. Now, if the government wants to attack us through its police or whatever, who are just hired hands of the banksters now, so... if that's what they want to do, take another £1 million off of JP Morgan and then come and beat the living daylight out of us for it, then I would see them as hired mercenaries and treat them as just that. And that time is going to come unless we engage this now, soon.
Well,
with some degree of wisdom.
Many ways coming up, kind of, from the man on the street going out, people on the ground, to maybe also having, get organised and do what they do, and infiltrate.
Well, what they do is
using their own system. We've got to find a different.
Well, the system is hermetic. The hermetic system. They are aware that everything evolves to an octave, so they will have a goal in mind and they'll set that process in motion, and then they'll sit back and only intervene at two stages. These are the stages of the Pythagorean comma, or apostrophe if you insist. But it's that's how they do it, to my knowledge. That's the way I've seen them do it, and it would make sense because the Hermetic Code is like the base of everything that they claim to be anyway. It's also very real. It is there in DNA. It is there in everything you look at. But that's another story.
It sort of brings us back to what you were saying at the start, and how that these certain groups, while they have evil elements in them, the information that they have themselves is clearly a powerful information. It can be observed scientifically. You can test it, and if I'm getting what you're saying correctly, is that like we should be aware of this as human beings, as creatures, because then once we're aware of it, then we have that power also.
That's right. There are 2 points on any evolving octave, as it were, and that could be a physical thing that's happening. It could be a thought process. It could whatever. Everything evolves in the same way, and I'm not on about evolution as such. It's different. In fact, this is the answer to the unanswered questions in evolution. if people like Richard Dawkins would get their head out of their own arses and wake up to this. But as I say, it is there, and they will intervene. I think back in the 1950s, a couple of guys called Dewey and Dakin actually produced a book on cycles, a study of cycles, I think it was called. And they proved then that the financial markets were subject to cycles which were based upon the stars and the planetary bodies. Absolutely proven. Now, so the city has known that, incidentally. The city actually employs econophysicists. Do you know there's a shortage of physicists and physics teachers, yeah? This was because back in the early 90s, the city employed them all. It took them.
Econophysicist, I've never heard that before.
Econophysicist, it's actually an official job title in the city, all right? And these guys work the physics of the economy. And they were given, Dewey and Dakin's Cycles book is one of the things that they go on. And this was why, I think it was the Gaussian copula formula by David Lee that unleashed hell. Because that was put in there for them to work as well. So these supposed physicists were working with their equations, but without actually understanding the numbers in them, if you see what I mean. Equations are complex, numbers aren't. So this goes to great depth, but the long and the short is that they use a system against us whereby they don't have to do much. We do it all for them in our ignorance. Now, we can turn around in their grand New World Order plan, just at the moment that they wish to bring down the final curtain on this and impose the whole thing on us, which is these times we're living in now. I believe there's something that the people can do. We can put in that Pythagorean comma, or kick is the other word. I prefer kick. Pythagorean kick at the point where the octave begins to involve. So, you know, in an octave you have tone, tone, semitone, yeah? And then tone, 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 semitone. It's those semitones. It's only half of the gap, so it's retarding at that point. And that happens in nature, everywhere. But what they realize is if you physically and consciously intervene where those semitones occur in any evolving structure, it will last. It will become permanent, or as permanent as anything can. This is why Hermetic stuff has lasted throughout history, and will keep coming back, because it is right and it does need adopting. But we need to get rid of the scum who's adopting it over our heads at the minute. Simple as that. There you go. That's my philosophy anyway. But I really think there is something we can do, more to the point, something we must do. And it does not involve claiming that we can't come together, or that, you know, this person's a shill or that person's a shill. The only people I've ever heard accusing others of being shills are those who are so damned ignorant of the subject they're supposed to be studying anyway that they wouldn't know, if you follow me. Yeah. So, you know, it's almost a way of getting noticed out there. Well, I think this guy's a shill because it's like, oh, get a life, you know? And that is what we've all got to start doing, I think.
And what do you mean by shill? Like on the internet or the...
Oh, yes, this word that is banded around, you know. For example, because I've spoken and had involvements with people in secret societies, because I wanted to know what they do and what they think. Well, of course, I must be their best friend and working for the enemy. It's like, oh, get a life, you know? People need to, well, there's a lot of deafness out there, I think, and that's largely because a lot of people's heads are shoved so far up their backsides that it's getting, you know, that's the way.
Well, it comes another point you made earlier on, like at the end of the day, it's about knowing yourself, and you can't really know yourself if you're so concerned about what other people are doing and thinking, you know.
Exactly. It is go and focus on yourself. But there is this philosophy out there which says that's actually all it's about. Go and put yourself right and everything else will. Well, that's a numbers game. That will work if everyone does that, but they won't and can't. The majority of this planet's population are not in a position to do that because tomorrow is about eating and surviving. Increasingly so for us as well. Yeah. So at what point are they going to engage philosophy like that? They're not, because someone might be shooting their kids. Do you follow me?
So the reality is, it's a sad reality that we live in.
Yeah.
And it keeps us continually sort of, I don't like using the word, but keeps us enslaved.
Exactly. So it is about self-awareness. It's a process everybody needs to go through. It's not for anyone else to tell you how to do it or whatever, but there are long-established techniques. This, in fact, is what Druidry, Masonry, and many of the others are about at that level. And yes, they can be abused at the top. And it's me who's been pointing out that, you know, the Queen was Druid. I posted the picture of her and so on. So,
can I ask you just very quickly, what's your take on the Queen? Do you think she's this huge towering embodiment of evil, or do you think she's just a puppet of the crown, as in the bank?
Is there a difference?
I would agree with you. Is there a difference? Anyone who can stand by and suck her people dry in the way that she does, allow the things to go on in this country in the way that she does, without ever speaking out against them in the way that she does, I can't see anything good at all. I really can't. And this concerns me when you have your constitutional groups and so on. I mean, I was reading an incredible letter that somebody from the British Constitutional Group sent to the Queen just 2 weeks ago. And it's like, well, first of all, if you're going to write to the Queen, make sure your grammar's basically correct, which it wasn't. It was shocking. But other than that, basically butt-licking the Queen. You know, we need you, your Majesty. We are your humble servants. Well, I'm not a bloody humble servant, if you follow me.
Yeah.
At all. Why should I be? They enslave this country.
What was she doing, like joining the Druid Order? I think that was just because she was trying to show everyone that she's a part of everything, and she's going to
exactly. They're trying to unify the religions. They're trying to create a global religion that is a hybrid of them all. And Druidry, as that is the religion, well, it's not a religion, but as that is the tradition from which all other religions came. Now, I know you could argue that, but in fact, hang on. I do have a good quote somewhere if I can just find it. So I know we're coming up to the end.
While you're looking for that there, just make a quick comment. She is considered to be the head of the quote-unquote pagan church or witchcraft in England, as much as she is the head of the Christian church. And I think, yeah, obviously there is you see this with the Vatican as well, and the Council of World Religions and things like that, that there is a definite move towards having a one world religion. But it's not a religion that, I don't believe it's going to be a religion of liberation of the individual. It's going to be a global control grid, which I believe which was the original intention of the Catholic Church, which means the universal. Catholic means universal. It was an effort to make a universal religion, bring them all under the pontiff of Rome, and all of the people in the world under one religion that suppresses your thought, gives you an interpretation of the book, the Bible, and tells you not to read it, puts it in a language that you can't understand, suppresses information, gives us the Dark Ages, brutally murders and crusades for hundreds of years. So, you know, anything that comes out of those guys, you know, intentions and their mouths, to me, I don't want anything to do with it. It can't be a good thing.
Exactly, that's the way I see it. It can't be. I don't see any difference between Catholic and Protestant. I think it's all.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
And I really don't have time for discussing the whole Catholic Protestant thing. It's like, you know, how infantile and childish do people have to be? You ask a Catholic what they disagree with the Protestants over, and vice versa, and honestly, you won't get a sensible answer anyway. That's not to condemn them all, but I'm talking about your average punter out there who says, I'm a Catholic or I'm a Protestant. They haven't got a clue what it means. So No,
It's become a cultural thing and an identity thing, I think, more than a spiritual thing. Yeah,
it has. So no, I couldn't support the Queen in any way or form. Would I call myself a Republican? I wouldn't call myself anything. My perspective is we have criminals in charge and they're sucking us dry. They are succubus and they need removing. So we can either do it over time and through peaceful means and so on and so forth, which they will obviously expect us to do and have planned to stop, or we can pull a trick on them. So I'm posing the question, what trick can we pull on them? How can we react in a way that they have not anticipated? And I think there is a way. And it certainly involves actually getting up and doing something. Not occupying St. Paul's when you don't actually have a reason for occupying it. And I hark back to that. These people were asked, what are you protesting about? And it was about the environment or schools or pride. You know, it's like, no. And this is where this counterintelligence campaign comes in.
Well, yeah.
to use people like that.
Well, then we're going to be arguing amongst ourselves when we're in these, activism, protests, whatever you want, for want of a better word, protests. And why are you here? We're actually arguing amongst ourselves about what the key issue is, when I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's a criminal cabal issuing the currency, controlling the religions, but the same group of people, and the focus should be on that, exposing that and becoming aware of that.
Well, exactly. I think there was a law passed in Parliament just yesterday, wasn't there, or last night? Which amused me, because I told my MP that that'll be Ken, I think you're still listening, Ken, and some of my colleagues up on Tyneside will give them a run for their money when they're out campaigning in their vehicles. There's nothing to stop us in our vehicles going behind them with megaphones and actually telling it like it is. I did that in the 97 campaign, general election campaign, incidentally. Great fun. Really fun. They passed the law last night. Don't know if you're aware of it.
Is that the gagging law?
Yeah.
What is this? I just caught a glimpse of it, because obviously it's in the UK.
Well, I don't know the detail yet, but it seems to be aimed at stopping that kind of thing. Well, if they think that's going to stop us, it's like, bring it on, you know? No, we can have some great fun around this country at the next election if this movement, again, came together with a specific intention of highlighting the lies of our MPs. With megaphones, good old Charlie Veitch, you know? Bit of that sort of thing. Although that's possibly swearing to some people to mention Charlie's name, because he didn't half upset a lot of people, didn't he? But, you know, so what?
Well, that's the problem when people, and I don't cast any aspersions on anybody, but when you put your faith into one individual in that way, then, you know, things like that are going to happen. But it should be 100 people with megaphones, not one guy and 100 people behind them, you know?
Of course. But we can do this in their election campaigns, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. They might say that's illegal. Well, come and stop us then. Yeah? Come and stop us. If you want to play these games, then the people can play them. And I wonder how many there are in this truth movement. Would be nice to bring them all together at Empire Pool one day or somewhere. Look, David, I can fill that place.
Wembley.
There's an awful lot we can do. I really think there is. But it's actually going to involve talking about it, planning it, and literally treating it as a military operation, but without violence. We can cause them so much grief without ever breaking the law, unless they introduce new laws to stop it. But, you know, we'll just ignore them when it comes to it. These are laws of criminals, yeah?
Well, if you say that the law is to cause no harm, the rule of law, the real rule of law, well, you know, as long as we don't cause direct harm, then it's they can write whatever they want on their pieces of paper and they cast their spells, but consciousness is rising, and consciousness is what will beat this.
But don't forget, don't lose sight that they are the masters of consciousness, yeah? So they know how to manipulate consciousness. So we need to step back every time we think we understand something and ponder whether we really do. And then when it's all too much to consider and our heads are exploding, make a cup of tea, sit down and realize it's actually very simple. A group of criminals are issuing our currency as a debt. Do you follow me?
Yeah.
So let's just go and stop it. And I can tell you, you'll find the shills in the truth movement the day you announce that we're all going to come together to take these people on. There'll be those standing up saying, no, 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 you can't do that. Yeah? So, there you go.
In there about the bringing in this gagging order in the UK, I think yesterday. You know, that once again, you know, I'm sure it's serving its purpose in their eyes of supposedly stopping the freedom of speech. But what it's going to do is provoke people to come out and riot and, you know, whatever against it. And then they're just being distracted with that.
Yeah.
And not the main issue.
I don't think people need to riot. They should never need to riot over anything.
You know what I mean? They'll be all up. So this would be filling everybody's mind. You know, this gagging laws just come in and whatever. So once again, it's pulling everyone away from the main issue, which is, as you say, you know, our currency and who's issuing it.
They don't have enough police in this country to contain us. They simply don't. If we wanted to take our local issues to the local criminals that are imposing them upon us, be it the head of your local authority or the Gestapo officer who's ruining your life through your benefit claims or whatever, you know, whoever these people are, take it to their front door. They're quite happy to bring grief to your front door. We can take it to theirs. Yeah? They don't have enough police to stop this. And I'm not on about harassing these people. I'm on about bringing it to them and their neighbours. Just like we can take the currency issue to all the union leaders and say, look, there's your solution. Tell me why that isn't the solution to all of your union problems. And they can't. And those union leaders who state, no, well, we're not going to do that. Well, we know who they're working for, don't we?
Our trade unions are totally corrupt in this country.
Yeah. Well, if they are, they go on the list too, don't they? What list is that? Don't tell him, Pike. Excuse me. So there you are. I think my throat is croaking so much now. I'm going to perhaps have to draw a line. But is there anything else you want to cover before we do?
No, I think we've covered everything for now. I don't know, Kev, what do you think?
No, I think we've covered everything as well. And thanks so much for sharing your insights with us tonight, Mark. It's been very interesting talking to you.
Oh, it's a pleasure, mate. Anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
And we have another one of your songs here as well, Lara's song. Do you want to give us a little bit of background on that one?
Oh, yeah. Well, Tomb Raider and Lara Croft. It always amused me, the thought of some lonely, sad person in his bedroom 24 hours a day playing Tomb Raider and falling in love with Lara Croft. So that's kind of what this song was about. It's all tongue-in-cheek. And it was done as an alternative movie theme for the Lara Croft movie. I did send the original demo to them, and they weren't too impressed. They thought I was taking the piss out of Lara Croft. Well, I pointed out I wasn't. I was taking the piss out of those who played with her. It speaks for itself anyway. This was Lara's song. But thank you for having me on, and hope to speak again.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Thanks very much. It's been very enjoyable.
Back on, and thanks so much, Kev, for kind of coming in here as well. I've just apologising to everyone. I've got the worst migraine in the world going on, and even before the show, I said I'm not going to be much use. But it's
well, Kev,
speciality as well. So.
We must have a natter sometime off air anyway when I'm not quite so croaky and coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. You have me on Skype.
You've obviously got some good insights there, and I think the more these things are discussed, the more understanding we're generally going to get of who this enemy is.
Absolutely.
Because they are just people. Anyway, thank you, my friends.
Thank you very much. I'll get the song on now.
Night.
Concealed traps and pitfalls await the unwary.
You're more than a game.
I hate tunes.
Does the whole goddamn world know your name?
Maybe.
Who's playing who? Maybe it's true. The game never ends. If I can do it with you. Harder and harder.
This is incredible.
So many levels inside you to know.
I think I can just about hold it.
Oh, it's about to go. Oh, Laura, who are you? You're making me grow. Oh, Laura, my baby. You're driving me crazy. Got you under my thumbs. Got you under my skin. Outrageous today. I think I'm falling in love with you. 'Cause you'll do anything I want you to. And you don't say a thing. Some other place and time. You've got me surfing on some old lines. Downloading walkthroughs on you. Oh, what can I do? I'll do it fine. If I can do it with you. Oh, Laura, my baby. You're driving me crazy. Got you under my thumbs. Got you under my skin. Outrageous today. I think I'm falling in love with you. 'Cause you'll do anything I want you to. And you don't say a thing. Laura, Laura, so little to say.
You aren't going to disappoint me, are you?
Laura, Laura, we've come all this way.
I need to find a man.
So don't tease me, Laura, 'cause I know your way.
And there you are.
Looking over your shoulder, I'm going over day after day. Laura, my darling, my joystick's twisting like a storm. You turn me on around 5 and can't turn you off until 4. And I'm still crying for more. Oh, Laura, my baby, my virtual lady. Got you under my thumbs, and you're making me sing. I raise your tune, save me. I think I'm falling in love with you. 'Cause you'll do anything I want you to. And you don't say a thing. Oh, Laura, my baby, my virtual lady.
No prizes for you this time, Lara.
Is this your pitch?
You are listening to the one and only
Tyrannosaur.
the land of the free.
Community radio at its best.